In this exercise, we're going to calculate the yield to maturity on a bond. Now, this is a pretty straightforward thing to do if you happen to have a BA2 Plus or some other financial calculator, or you're using Excel. It's not particularly easy to do if you're using tables or if you're using a regular old scientific calculator, a simple one. But we'll go ahead and do it with the BA2 Plus when we actually need to do the calculations. In this case, we've got a bond. It has a face value of $1,000. It has a coupon payment of $45 every 6 months, and so to make it really clear, this is a 9% annual coupon rate bond with semi-annual payments. So that gives you 4.5% every 6 months. This is a 17-year bond, which of course 17 years, that gives you 34 semi-annual payments. And we have a price. We have a price of $1,225 for each bond. The question is, what's the annual stated nominal yield to maturity? And so you need to make sure that you understand the difference between the yield that you calculate for a 6-month period and the annual nominal stated yield to maturity, which will be that 6-month rate multiplied by 2. Now, one thing you do need to notice and make sure you understand is that since this bond is trading for $1,200, which is more than par, then your interest rate is going to be, the yield is going to be less than the coupon rate, which is 9%. So the annual yield is going to be less than 9%. The semi-annual rate, that 6-month rate, will be less than 4.5%. So let's go ahead and do the calculations. What we have is N is equal to 17 times 2, that's 34 periods. We have a payment of $45 each period, a future value of $1,000, and a present value of negative $1,225. And notice that present value has to be opposite in sign from the payment and the future value, and that's because of the convention that the BA2 Plus has. It's also the same convention that Excel has and most other financial calculators as well. The present value, the price, is of opposite side from the cash flows that you get from the bond. And the rationale for that is you would pay $1,225 in order to receive $1,000 at the end and $45 every 6 months. So let's go ahead and open up the BA2 Plus and do the calculation. I'll stick it over here so that we can hopefully see everything at the same time. All right, so N is equal to 34. So 34 N. And by the way, notice that there is no BGN up in this upper right-hand corner. That means that the BA2 Plus is set to calculate annuities as ordinary annuities, not annuities due. Remember, ordinary annuities are annuities where the cash flows occur at the end of every period, and that's what we assume most of the time. And it will have BGN up here in the upper right-hand corner if the annuities are occurring, if the cash flows are occurring at the beginning of the period. All right, so N is equal to 34, $1,000, that's the future value. We're going to calculate I/Y. We haven't gotten to that point yet. The present value is $1,225, and we have to make that negative. So there's the present value. And the payment is $45 every 6 months. And we now just compute I/Y. And we get 3.377%. That's the rate every 6 months. And the convention with bonds is to get the annual stated rate. You just multiply by 2. So times 2 is 6.75%, which is the answer. Now notice, and let's check that. Yeah, 6.75%. Now notice that if you had put $1,225 in as the present value instead of negative $1,225 as the present value, and you tried to compute the yield, then you'll get an error. And the reason is you don't have a sign change. You've got to have a sign change in order to calculate that yield to maturity.